Hey, good morning, Centers for Spiritual. Try that again. Good morning, Centers for Spiritual Living, Palm Desert and beyond. Welcome to our daily show at 10 o'clock. Everyone, let's welcome Jeffon. He's here. We're so glad you're here with us. You made such an impact on Sunday. We're doing some great work. But listen, I want to start out by doing a quick prayer to open this up. Let's just know that there are open hearts and open minds that are tuning in today and recognizing that something greater, a greater expression of love and of harmony, balance, and order is establishing itself in the mind of God, making its way through each one of us. And so we know through these conversations and through the journey that we're all taking together, we will establish a new idea of equity, of just complete acceptance and embodiment of one another, of our paths that led us up to this point, into a future that is good and great for everyone. For this opportunity and for this beautiful day, we just say thank you, beloved presence, these open minds and open hearts and new ideas. We are truly blessed, and so it is.
So it is.
So it is. So Jeffon, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
We're doing fine. So how did you feel about Sunday?
I've had many conversations about it, and I feel that the willingness to engage in a discussion that is often uncomfortable is such a beautiful place to start. And for your willingness to really have created that space, and all of the congregation who was willing to tune in and engage in that conversation. I mean, I was extremely inspired and happy. I felt joyful about it, but I do know that it's just the beginning. So um,
Yeah.
thank you for providing that opportunity, you and everybody behind the scenes there.
Well, and I want people to know that we're talking with Jeffon about having this be one of the weekly shows that we have every week. Like Charles and I do one, and Sensational Six, our ministerial students do one, but actually having this become a staple in our programming so that we can continue to work on this together. I think it's a dialogue that has to be ongoing. And I'm thinking we need to dedicate, 1/7 of our entire effort here at the church, 7 days a week, but 1/7 we clearly have 1 hour where we are totally dedicated to continuing this movement, because we have 7 hours a week that we program out to the world. But we take one of those and we make sure we talk about this issue every week. So I'm hoping we can pull that off. It's interesting though. It's interesting. I got some really, really great comments. We were on the news. I think I sent you the news clip.
Yes.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. I was getting texts from all people going, did you know you're on the news? Did you know you're on the news? And the guy did a pretty good job of actually getting that clip in place. I thought he did, he edited it just about right for us.
Yeah.
You certainly had a real profound statement on there about if you're only hanging around people in your bubble, then we got to change this. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
I just want to say it's so fascinating. I can see how news clips can be you get a small little portion of the message, and it can be skewed either way. So in saying, if you're in your little bubble, then you have to recognize that you might be part of the problem. It's not saying you're bad, you're a bad person, do something. It's just simply saying be aware of your surroundings and be willing to build those bridges where otherwise you just simply weren't aware, or maybe where there were once barriers or obstacles. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm encouraging all those people who are watching us today to throw things in the chat, ask questions. We're encouraging questions today. I've got a couple that I want to talk about. Let me show you a picture. Unfortunately, with this, so last night, if you could, Trey, bring that picture up. Last night, they started protesting in Palm Desert, and they moved the protest, and the protest moved around. And it actually, I had a suspicion early in the day that it was going to move near our area. And so those big windows behind us in the church, we boarded them up. So if you drive past the center and you see this, it was just because all it would take would be one rock in that giant picture window would be destroyed. So we decided, so I didn't want anybody alarmed if they drove past the church and they saw that. No, the window wasn't broken, but we did take precautionary measures to make sure that nothing could happen. And it's a good thing we did, because right around 6:30, I think it was, right around that time, I got a call from Elizabeth and William, and the protest was starting to march up Portola, but they were able to stop it at El Paseo and direct them to down to another part of down El Paseo. So I was glad that we were able to at least make sure that was in place. And I thank those peace officers that were there. There were about 50 of them, making sure that the thing got rerouted, got tracked to a different area. So that's where we are. So what's going on? What are you looking at in the world? I mean, we saw peaceful protests broke up yesterday. Um, that was really upsetting to watch that whole thing. I don't know. Did you happen to see that live? I was watching it live as it was happening.
Dr. Joe, I've had to selectively monitor what I'm choosing to absorb and observe. I know that there's something that's very deep, and as you eloquently stated on the news and even on Sunday, I mean, we're witnessing the effects of something that is a very deep wound that is bringing this about. I know on Sunday when we returned here, Sunday, maybe Monday, but they were marching in San Bernardino, which, as we had in our discussion about San Bernardino, and I mean, fire started and it turned to a pretty rowdy crowd. Um, and then I had the conversation with my cousin. My uncles are from San Bernardino, and I said, imagine what would happen if, and I mentioned this as well on Sunday, but imagine what would happen if people of color, black people, brown people, whatever you want to say, just people in general, if we were willing to embrace this inherent sense of equality within ourselves, recognizing that we are just as valuable and worthy, and found a way to channel that anger or aggression into different modalities that could help usher in a new paradigm. And we understand that people are doing things where they are in their current state. We know that there have been signs of individuals who have been agitating protests. I know my friends in Seattle I've talked to them when they've been marching with the Black Lives Matter movement there, and stating the people who are breaking windows and throwing things through windows and running into different stores are not people who they were marching with earlier. They're, you know, agitators there who have been setting off chaos. And
Correct.
it's just I mean, it's such a deep thing to talk about. It's
Well, what I was impressed about watching, because I don't know why I tuned in when I did. I was watching CNN when uh, the peaceful protesters in DC were, tear gas and forcefully moved away from an area for that photo op for the president. And um, what I was impressed with, when I was looking at the demographics and the makeup of the people that were there protesting, and it was probably, I want to say, 50% white and 50% black. There were and it wasn't violent. It was a peaceful protest, and
yeah,
I was so glad to see that. Now it turned ugly. It got really ugly because of the force and things. And same with thing here in Palm Desert. My understanding is that there was a march in Palm Desert, and then I heard it was canceled because of the curfew, and then people still went out, and everything was very peaceful until someone, and it wasn't tear gas. Someone actually lit a firework so that it appeared to be, and made the noise, and caused this panic and adrenaline and everything else to start taking place. So it is kind of an unnerving thing to do. And people have asked me, and maybe I don't know about this. People said, "Are you going to go to these demonstrations?" And part of me is saying, you know what? I'm not comfortable in this situation where people are getting um, where there's the violent part. If there was a peaceful demonstration, I would, but all these peaceful ones are turning into violent ones. And I would rather say, okay, you know what we're going to do as a faith community? We're going to go to a book and we're going to study and we're going to do the real work that needs to be done on the inside so that the outside changes. We can make our appearances when we need to or when we feel compelled to do that. But I'm not sure if it's about outside. I'm not sure if it's an outside job now or an inside. What do you think?
that's such a great point. My wife and I were just talking prior to us getting started this morning, and while outside we can see, I think the work is within ourselves. And if you recall, we had the discussion on Sunday about that illusionary dyad that keeps this superior inferior in place, and beginning to call ourselves out in ways in which we are participating in that back and forth. If we feel as if we're superior, then we're excluding people. If we feel as if we're inferior, then we're excluding ourselves. And really doing the inner work by way of difficult conversations, I think So often when we have these discussions, people, I felt myself, I've seen people in my family feel as if they need to be very defensive, reserved, and guarded, as if they don't want to open up this Pandora's box. It's almost as if we're taking this light of conscious awareness, right? We talk about the conscious, subconscious, unconscious often in Science of Mind. We take that top surface level of conscious awareness, which scientific studies say by the time we're 35, roughly 95% of what we do is unconscious. It's habitually just, it's the way we behave. If we can take that little 5% of conscious awareness into our unconscious unawareness and illuminate those dark spots that we just simply don't know are there, have avoided, or just simply ignore, we then can start restoring some of that inherent equality within ourselves. And the degree to which that shift occurs within, we then show up differently. We're willing to engage in conversations and don't feel as if we have to be guilty or defensive or shy away from it, but we embrace it and move into it. Um, and that's why, again, I'm so appreciative for the work that you're doing and many in your community and congregation to have these conversations. It may not lead us to the promised land tomorrow, so to say, but it's a necessary step in the journey.
Well, that's what I figured. I mean, that we have to start somewhere. And that's, it's interesting. On Sunday, I went to, after we did all that, and uh, I was feeling very emotionally drained. I guess I was emotionally draining. It was emotionally draining leading up to the actual service that we did together, because in my mind, things have been rolling around, and I thought, okay, get this off, let's do this. And then when we did it, it was amazing. I felt so good about it. And so I was sort of tired when we got home, but some friends asked us over and they said, come on over. We're just having like 3 or 4 people over for a birthday party. And so we're all sitting there in the pool and we're all talking about, this, a lot of them watched the what we did on Sunday, the service. And then we started going on different subjects. And I actually started hearing other comments about other ethnic groups. And I'm like, oh my God. And I screamed it out. I said, listen to what you're saying. Listen to what you're saying. Oh my God, did you hear? We have blind spots. We all have blind spots.
Mhm.
And it was just, like you said, it was an unconscious rolling of the tongue that really people weren't paying attention to until someone calls them out on it and went, whoa, listen to what you just said. And then everybody froze and they went, oh my God, oh my God, yeah, I just realized I did that. And so it was interesting because I think every group,
Every
I don't care what color you
Yep.
are, I don't care what country you're from, wherever you are, whoever you are, you're a human being. And there's going to be blind spots, these blind spots that we've had, and they've been ingrained and we've accepted them and they're not questioned. And the ego doesn't even want to question them because if we question them, then we have to say we've been wrong, believing what we've been believing this whole time of our life. And so we have a battle with the ego. So, I mean, all of this leads up to, it's a real shift in a belief system. I mean, it's not just one part, it's a whole shift in a belief system that we have held, all of us, all ethnic groups, with everyone else. And I think it's going to take a lot of work. So, someone made the comment, and I'm going to ask you this question. Um, when people say, I don't see color, I don't see
Mhm.
color. How does that ring in with you?
Uh,
I see people, I just see people as individuals. I don't see color.
well, I would say, and again, it's important for me to state that these are my perspectives.
Yeah, no, I know you're not
Okay,
speaking for
okay,
everybody.
okay.
I'm just asking you. You're a young black man, and I'm going, okay. And plus, you've got a cool, um, you've got a really cool approach to life, and you are metaphysical, and you're very spiritual and motivational, and you see things from different perspectives. So no, I know you're not representing
Okay, okay.
the national platform. You're representing Jeffon, and I'm representing Joe in Palm Desert. And if we can at least have a conversation and clue people in, then I'm good with that.
Perfect, perfect.
Okay.
So when I hear people say that, I can look from their perspective and see where they're trying to come from. But I also inherently feel as if you're dismissing something that is an inherent part of me. You're dismissing a group of people or person or their experience, and at times it's a bypass to avoid or ignore what a skin tone or a color of an individual has had to go through in comparison to somebody else of a different skin tone. Just because an individual says that they don't see color does not mean that systemic racism and or oppression does not exist. And if one is unwilling to recognize it, then it goes back to another one of our points that we mentioned. Avoidance or denial or just simple ignorance to that truth is the fuel that keeps it going. So I would challenge people who say, no, Jeffon, I don't see color. I treat everybody equal. We're all one. And from a spiritual standpoint, I completely understand. There is an energy that enables all of us to wake up and breathe and move and exist and have our being. It's the space in which we create in. It's the creation that is dwelling within us that empowers us to do so. But in this earthly realm, when we are walking on this planet, anybody who is willing to think critically can see that there are differences that exist by way of one's skin color, background, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identification. And for this conversation here today, we're talking about the specifics as it relates to systemic racism. And we can recognize by way of looking at institutions, looking at systems, looking at large government bodies, and asking ourselves, is there true equality and equity that is flowing through that? And from a critical thinking standpoint, the question from my perspective is obviously not. And therefore, instead of saying I don't see color, say I understand that there are differences that exist by way of various individuals, how they show up in this world. And it is my responsibility as a metaphysical or spiritual individual to begin to dismantle these, because my unconscious awareness of it is inherently fueling what I'm standing in and not against. I said a lot there.
Yeah, no, you did. And it's interesting because I was raised as a little kid. Like I told you about my dad doing what he did in the black and white communities where we lived and where he worked. And ever since I was a little kid, my dad always said, he said, don't ever look at people as if they're a color. Look at them as just their people and treat them like that, Joe. And so it was very strange for me. I remember when I was like 5, 6 or 7 years old, and I remember having that belief system in place. And actually it worked really well until I went into an environment where people were talking negatively about the Black community, and I was shocked because I'm like, but we're all people, we're all God's children. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to look at that. So when I say that, like with myself, I have a point of reference that said we were raised not to see, it wasn't not to see color, but to honor all humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And it transcended color. It was like, it doesn't matter what color their skin are. They're God in skin form. So we just love them and we support them. We don't have to say this is their path or this was their path or this. They're held by any other boundaries or any limitations that we put on them in our mind. So it is hard for me because I always go, you know what? I've always looked at just people as being people.
Yeah.
You know, people as being people, and I've never ever thought twice about it. And then as I got older, I was then surrounded by people who did make a deal out of it and who did start talking like that. So it began to be, then I had to look at my own thoughts and I'm like, well, are we all? And I think we are. And I always believed that in my heart of hearts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of challenging because when I see that, I go, yeah, I do see color, but I also I don't look at it as color. I look at it as, so what? It's like paint. We all have different colors, and but you're the human being that you are, reflecting and experiencing God by means of you.
Precisely. And I think from your perspective right there, it's like from an individual perspective, that is a beautiful way to approach people of all differences, but also being willing to embrace your platform or in your experience to then start the dismantling of oppression and racism that exist for those individuals who are unwilling to take the approach that you just mentioned.
And that's what I try. And that's exactly what I keep thinking. Build the bridge. All we have to do is start building the bridge. Not all. Makes it sound very like we have it can be done a week from Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah, let's set a Facebook live and we'll solve everything then.
Yeah, let's see how we can roll with that. But no, we have to begin and actually right now I feel like we're in the planning stages of building a bridge. We're not even building the bridge yet. We're sitting down with the architects and talking about, okay, how do we even approach this in a way that gives us the leadership that we need and the direction that we need to start to build what we believe needs to happen. And and listening, it's really funny listening to like Mayor Cuomo, or Governor Cuomo last night. I was listening to things happening. You know, he talked about the riots and the looters and everything. He seemed there was very little concern about the rioting and looting, because he's like, this is just vandalism, and these are people that are not part of they don't believe that these are people part of this protest. These are people taking advantage of what was happening and using it for their own selfish gain.
Mhm.
He said, but again, we have to get back to what the real issue is. And I love when he said that. It's like, let's get back to what the real issue is.
Right.
Being distracted by what's happening out there in the world of effect with the looting and the violence and that kind of stuff. That's sucking our focus away from what we need to be really talking about. And
Yeah.
do you agree? I mean, we've been
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah.
I just can't say that enough. It's like, but I'm watching the leaders of the country start saying, look, if we wanted to stop all this stuff, we could stop all this stuff. Like Cuomo was saying, we can shut this stuff down in a heartbeat, but this is what has to happen. This is the action and activity that will eventually bring about conversation. So we just have to wait, let it die down, so that then we can hopefully have the conversation.
So there's two things I want to say. First, I want to quickly jump back to that point about not seeing color and just share a very short story about my experience. When I was growing up in Salt Lake, I was raised, my mom and my grandparents, in a nice area of Salt Lake. Many people in the congregation heard this story, but um, and it was predominantly white. My sister and I, and there were a handful of other people in the whole community who had a different shade of skin. And I didn't even know that I was a different color. I mean, I had no idea. And it wasn't until I believe I was maybe 6 years old. That might have been my first experience with it. When I was playing with the kids in the neighborhood, and my little sister, who's a few years younger than me, was there, and they started making fun of her. And then that's when young kids, started calling us the N word. And I remember as a very young kid, not knowing what to do. I ran into my grandparents' house crying, and my grandmother, who had, she was raised in central Utah, a white woman. I mean, she experienced discrimination in terms of gender, but not racial. And I remember running to her and crying, and she sat me on her lap, and that's when she told me, you can be anybody you want to be. Somebody's words don't have to define you, and that always stuck with me. But it would still reveal itself when I was growing up, and kids would say, you're just faster because you're black. Black people have extra muscles, so you can run faster. That's why you're better at sports. Or in discounting all of these things, and as I grew, I then began to recognize, wow, like I don't see this, that I'm a different color, but they're telling me that I am. And at a young age, if a kid is saying that, you can imagine the way in which that's been ingrained in our minds, often unconsciously, by way of what we're seeing, by way of what we're learning, by way of what we're being taught, by way of education systems, by way of the way in which history is written and put together. So I just wanted to touch on that. And if you don't have a question to that, then I'll jump to what Cuomo said. And I believe an NBA coach from Utah, Quinn Snyder. I was just talking with my mentor who's in Utah, and I believe on the front page of the Salt Lake Tribune, he said, "Compassion is not enough. We need to start speaking up against systemic racism." And that is the first person that I've heard in a high position. And I may be wrong. You don't have to say that I'm definitely right here, but that's the first person that I've heard in a very high position who is a Caucasian man, a white man, and being willing to say we have to dismantle racism. Imagine, Dr. Joe, if the government, if the police, people in the police union, if city officials were willing to come out and say, we hear you. We see the looting, we see the damage. The reason this is happening, we know, is because of this systemic racism and oppression that our country has been built upon. We are willing to all work together to begin to resolve this. And this is not an empty promise. We will be held accountable. Officers will be tried. Government officials will be tried. And we have to be willing to really show that they have some skin in the game, because there's been a lot of just hollow words, as you and I both know.
Did you see that for my hometown is Flint, Michigan. Did you see the sheriff from Flint, Michigan? If you haven't, you need to Google this.
I would love to.
No, seriously, Google it, because everything you just said, he went down where there were protests. He took his bulletproof vest off. He threw his gun down. He's like, I'm here. Let's walk together. And then he did a press conference. And I mean, everything you just said, he just said. And he's a white sheriff in Flint, Michigan. And he was just saying that. He said, we have to lead it. Officers need to be held accountable to a higher level. He said all of the things you just said.
So Flint, Michigan, systemic racism and oppression. If they were willing to take this stand, clean water would be in Flint, Michigan 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so that is where words are one thing, which is important, but action and saying like, okay, if this was a wealthy suburb of, I don't know where a wealthy suburb is in Michigan. One of my friends is one of those areas. Okay.
There are a lot of those downtown near Detroit.
So, but yeah, like that is the addressing. Yes, the sheriff saying something is incredible and powerful and important, but how can we see it? Because there are still people in Flint, Michigan, which is a poor community, various different races there, that are turning on their water and should not drink that.
Yeah, my aunt still doesn't have drinking water. Yeah, and my whole family's still back there, aunts, uncles, cousins, things like that. No, it's an area that was really hard hit by
a lot of stuff.
You know. So okay, so here's something interesting. I have something for you. So Trey and I were up on a corner, and this car came up, and it was playing loud music, and it was rap music, and it was the words that were being articulated or spoken in this were like, talking. It was downgrading women. It was about violence against police officers. It was really offensive on every level.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm going, okay, wait a minute. If that's how do we look at that? How do I look at that and go, wait a minute? If this is how you're talking in this car, you're talking about shooting police officer, the music you're playing. And I mean, and they were all singing the lyrics like they were like kids do in a car, right? Mm-hmm. And this was going on. I'm going, okay, so how are we going to hold the Black community leaders responsible for changing that dialogue, so that there isn't this need to feel that way, or there isn't this need to feel like, okay, I'm listening to that, and that is actually something that is being ingrained. Yes. That violence is acceptable, that the police are not going. So we've got to work. Don't you think we need to work both ends of this?
Yeah, it's not a one race problem or one group of people problem. I mean, it's across the board. And I believe that, look, I grew up listening to that music. I listen to hip hop, and I choose to go towards like the more positive or conscious hip hop. But I have friends and family members who listen to music that I would not play loud in front of my grandparents or family members. And to me, it's a few different things. One is the way in which a large percentage of African Americans have chose to see themselves. Our internal self-image and self-worth, and therefore will identify with particular messages and ideas and concepts that reflect what we believe that we are. And if we continuously see ourselves, our family members, people in our community downtrodden, arrested, put down, and we're in a gang environment, maybe we'll lean to that. Now, that's not everybody by any means, and you can listen to rap, gangster rap, and not be that individual. Um, but another, on the whole flip side, is okay. Let's think about then the music industry. While right now the barrier of entry to create music is very low, traditionally those artists that really get pushed up on that platform are by way of music executives. When you look at the top music executives, they tend to reflect the systemic racism that we are talking about in this country. It's predominantly uh, white owned. And so they are choosing to funnel what music comes out, and then they can put money and resources behind it. Now, I'm not saying that that's the solution. Oh, so just change everybody who's at the top of uh, music executives. No, we have to take some responsibility and accountability for the message that we are bringing out. But also, we have to recognize that it's far deeper than just simply don't say this. And if somebody is in an environment, I just recently I look at music that comes out of San Bernardino just to see what's happening. And I just saw a song that came out from this individual who's a part of the Crips, a gang out there, and he had 8 people on this one song who are from his area, talking about their community, young to old, and it was gangster rap, but they talk about their seeing their dad get killed when they were 5 years old, their mom being on drugs, and the community pulled them in and raised them, being around individuals that they look up to were the dope dealers and the people who are hustling, maybe pimping women or exploiting individuals in the community, and they find this family unit, and suddenly that begins to form their imagination. And you can imagine a young kid who has no direction being immersed in that environment. It's and no positive school or teachers who are there to bring them and uphold them and lift them, because they're walking through hopelessness. And it's not just here in America; we see it all over. So it's a very deep thing, but I am not trying to deflect the responsibility and accountability that everybody has, including African Americans, all of us.
Okay. Because I think that's an important part. We all have to do our thing.
It's not a one and done thing.
Because there's systems within each ethnic group that are broken down that need to be prepared. They're not working in today's environment. And maybe I think what we need to look at is a more global picture, that within every skin color there's some sort of or belief system. There's something in here that needs to be examined and reorganized and put in different perspective. Because I think in order for us to do that, then I have to be able to listen to, because I tell you what thing that this conversation has brought about is a lot of people talking to me, going, okay, but what about this? But what about this? But what about this? And I said, okay, just the mere fact that you're asking that question means that you have a blind spot in that area. That you're like, okay, well, I don't have to change because their music isn't changing. If the guy next to me in his car is playing this music, then I'm justified keeping my belief system in place. That's what it boiled down to, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if my anger about the looting keeps me from listening to what the real problem is, then I'm just actually continuing to hold on to the problem and justifying it by someone else's actions that aren't appropriate, that aren't being sanctioned by any of the leaders of that community. It's like, okay, so we're running on a list of, if you do that, then I'll do this. And if you don't change this, then I'm not going to change that.
Right.
And I think we need to bust that down, because that's where I think we're stuck. I think we're genuinely stuck in that. Well, because this is what's happening over here, I don't have to change me.
Well,
And you're going to find, and please, I mean, I put my life out there as one giant fault. I mean, I'm always doing stuff wrong. So it's like, okay, well, if you're going to find fault and say, I'm not going to change because, Joe, you're doing this, then no one would ever change.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We'd all be sitting here going, okay, we're the same people that we were before. All right, so let's go ahead. I gotta.
Can I just, before you get to that, what were the songs that they were playing in the '60s? Sam Cooke.
You're asking like I remember. I was 6.
No, I'm saying in general. It was very positive. It was very
Well, yeah,
That
when you look, okay, when you look at the golden era of this,
Motown.
right,
Yeah.
Motown, yeah, yeah, that that was always. I mean, I think of the, Diana Ross, Gladys Knight, Aretha Franklin, those those, you know, that music of that era that was Motown out of Detroit didn't have that element until, and I remember when I was in school, then the element of that when rap came out, and
Hmm.
then when rap came out, there was an anger and a message of anger in it, and that started to create a divide in that community, in our communities. I do remember that it was the late 70s or 80s when it started coming out, and then people were like, well, I don't like, let's, no, and then rap became more and more popular, and then it became gangster rap, I guess. We moved in from just rap music to, other messages being filtered through that media. So no, I remember that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then, from the peaceful, positive Motown vibes to the gangster rap, there have been some surface level changes, but the deep foundation has yet to actually transform.
I mean, if we all just sang Diana Ross "Ain't No Mountain High Enough," I think we'd all do great.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it works in every gay bar that I've ever been to. It makes everyone start singing, having a good time. All right, we had a lot of comments. Thank you so much for all the comments about how you enjoyed Sunday service. I'm glad a lot of you have picked up that book already. Um, yes, a new paradigm of amongness consciousness. That is a relation consciousness. We are challenged to think of ourselves in relation rather than to you, me, self, and other. Presence is within and among. That's true. Okay.
Hmm.
Thank
Hmm.
you for that. Yes, we're emotionally unconscious. I am relieved to hear you are moving away from black and white. It's not about only color, but definitely about difference we shy away from. I'm not sure if I'm moving away from black and white. I don't think I'm moving away from black and white yet.
I can see that perspective too, Joe. When we talk about differences, uh, when I talk about diversity, differences are an inherent. I mean, you can replace the word diversity with differences, but one that is very apparent in this conversation is black and white by way of, if we look at, and I say this often, the system of racism, supremacy, and oppression. We cannot ignore that. Sure, it shows up in a varying way of degrees by way of differences, but it is very apparent on the surface if you look at black and white.
So, but okay, so then let's say we do. Okay, I will look at this. This is a black and white issue, and now I can set that aside as a black and white issue and say now we need to actually get to the. I know where the groups lie, and now we need to work. In other words, we can define the group that needs to work together. Group A, we could call it Group A and Group B. They happen to be black and white. Now we need to put Group A and Group B together so that they work together. So we can look at it. We've identified it and said, yes, this is black and this is white. Group A and Group B. How do we get to where we need to go? Because I actually think and maybe this is racist. I guess maybe I'm being racist about this. I'm actually thinking that as we define things as black and white, we continue to hold the label of that when we're actually what we're trying to do is to create equality so that the labels don't matter.
That's I don't think that that's a racist thought at all. Krishnamurti says, wherever there is division, there is conflict. Unity cannot exist where there are two separates.
Yeah.
Conflict can always stir up there, but
So it's like Group A and Group B. We know where this was. We know who started. We know the background and history of it. Now, how do we put these two groups together? So I could see that, David. Okay, I'll take that one. Okay, next one. I have an adopted Asian daughter who was also exposed to white racism in Vermont. White supremacy is prevalent everywhere. I don't want to believe I'm a part of that, but if I am not actively practicing anti-racism, I'm guilty. It's true. You said something. You were
that's a positive. I really appreciate that comment.
yeah. You said something about that in my sister caught a quote from you. She had transcribed a quote from what you said. Oh, I wish I. a commitment to do something every day, to look at your own.
Oh, I did see that.
So that was my sister who posted that. So she transcribed it and posted it, and it's been now reposted everywhere. A lot of people have been looking at that. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about here. The days that we don't think about it are days that we are not participating in the healing of it. We actually need to make it a conscious part of our day. And then I would say, and if we're doing that, then it's not just about group A and group B. It's about every group, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Because then we have to, because it's not, while our conversation is about group A and B, and that's what we're having today, the bigger picture is it's not just group A and B, it's the way we look at all groups all the way around. But for our purposes here, and I think this is where I have found the disconnect happens. When we go from Black Lives Matter to All Lives Matter, it feels like we're moving off the Black Lives Matter. We're not trying to heal the Black Lives Matter issues. Does that make sense?
There's a really great point that says, we really can't say all lives matter until we can prove that the Black ones do.
Okay. How do you feel about that?
When I hear that, I'm saying, well, yes, from my perspective, everybody's life has value. That is not a thought that's in my mind where I'm like, no, that person's life is not as valuable. So from that fundamental level, especially from our spiritual background, all lives have value, are important, are beautiful reflections of the infinite. But we also have to recognize that there has been a disproportionate amount of individuals who are Black skin, who do not have the same treatment as people who have fair skin. And that is not just in our country, that's across the globe. I see it when I'm in Honduras all the time with my friends who are Garifuna and Black, and I'm light skinned. I fit in with the Spanish people. They treat me totally different than they treat my friends.
Okay, so then let's go down that avenue then, because it raises the question. You have a group of Hispanic people. Build the wall, keep these people on the other side of the wall, separate their families,
Yep.
children's at the border. Don't you think that when we just say Black Lives Matter and not all lives matter, that we're diminishing that Hispanic lives matter and that what that's going on, that the separations and the deaths that are happening in those camps right now,
That is
fallen off the radar? Don't you think that is that fair to say just Black Lives Matter, but the Hispanic lives that are having this struggle that they've had for centuries as well, is that fair to say?
I feel that in saying Black Lives Matter, you're not diminishing or dismissing the value of anybody else's lives.
Okay, so when I say Black Lives Matter, I also need to be able to say Brown Lives Matter.
Yeah, as does all people's lives matter.
Right.
And saying that Black Lives Matter and focusing on what is happening by way of Black folks being treated a certain way by a system that we are all a part of. We can address that while I think we all have the capacity to address that while also embracing the true conscious awareness that everybody's life has value. It's not saying, well, I'm just valuing Black lives, so I'm dismissing or ignoring all of this. Because again, even with Hispanics, the Latinx folks, if we act as if what's happening is not there, then we are fueling that conflict as well.
Yeah.
This is the uniqueness of humanity. We have we have a lot of work to do, and it's easy to look through one peephole.
It's huge. It's huge. It's a huge undertaking. I mean, it is. I mean, come on, Jeffon, you got to think about it. It's like, wait a minute. Okay, so, and I got an interesting comment from someone. They're like, Joe, I'm willing to do just about anything, but I can't keep track of everything that's supposed to matter.
Yeah, right. You need an assistant just for that. But then
and they're in their 80s, right? They're in their 80s, and they're like, I don't know what's supposed to. I can't keep track of every. And they're the same people that say, I don't know what places I'm supposed to eat at and not eat at because people don't support, LGBTQ equality.
Yep,
I don't know. It's like, how do I keep? Is there like a master list of things I'm supposed to?
Yeah, right.
It's like,
Well,
There's some kind of spiritual checklist that I have to watch.
And then that's the reason why it's easy just to avoid it and just go about normal day-to-day things. If it's not impacting me, then why do I have to think about it? I have enough things on my plate.
If it impacts thee, it impacts me. Okay, so here we go. But you know what? I will say this. Okay, so let's back off that for just a minute.
Okay.
Um, if someone's willing to look, it may be overwhelming, that idea of Black Lives Matter, Brown Lives Matter, everybody's life matters. Boycott this, go here, go there. But as long as as long as we start to educate at the simplest level, like getting this book and doing a book study and having people come online and watch it and walk through with it with us, then we're starting to do some work.
Yeah.
We may not be, look, I don't think anybody's going to get an A+ and a star on their paper, but I don't think that, I'm not looking for an A+ and a star. I'm looking for any movement on any level. And that, to me, if you can start there, then that's a really good place to start. People want a place to start.
I think that's a perfect place to start. I have this here, which I look at often. And there's plenty of others, and I'm more than happy to have conversations about this. I think that there's a few people who have mentioned, a starting point has to be within, each looking at our own hearts, minds, and examine our cultural conditioning. Then we need a dialogue, sharing our experiences, all this before group A engages with group B. How can we move forward if we are blind to our own unconscious attitudes? That internal introspection, we have to be like an astronaut of inner space. We have to be willing to explore this vast universe inside of ourselves and pinpoint the areas where we come up short, not from a guilt perspective, not from a shame perspective, but from a expansion type of perspective.
Whew. Okay, let me go back to these. Hold on, I gotta get something more of these.
I jumped down a few questions.
Yeah, I know. I need to go back up. Hang on. Okay, I'm not the best at this. This is where my age shows. I believe that existing bridges have to be torn down before new ones can be built. Yep, I agree with that too. I think some of the old bridges, it's time for them to be torn down. Education, support, accountability. Yep, I agree.
Mhm.
I attribute the MTV show The Real World that began in 1992 as having a large influence on the shifting of a young generation's acceptance of someone that was unlike themselves. It reached out to a generation of young people growing up in small towns across the country that would normally not be exposed to other cultures, ethnic groups, or sexual identities. By watching the show The Real World, it made the unknown known. It put an actual face to something that was never before experienced by a younger generation. That's a good point, Steve.
That's a really great point.
That's a really great point. And I great, good point. Minds have to be changed before things can be changed. Agreed. Here we go. I think a small study groups are an excellent way to address the issue. It would be important that they are heterogeneous. What is that? I can't read it under my glasses.
Yep, you said it right.
Yeah, I can't even. I had an eye thing done that was supposed to improve my vision. Let's just say it didn't take the right. Could we partner with a community that's different from our majority? Okay.
A fascinating point to that. I spoke at CSL Beaumont, which is there are a handful of Black folks in the congregation there, and I think even just reaching out to various CSL communities who we share some like-minded perspectives and can engage in these conversations. And also CSL Riverside has there are a good majority, a good amount of Black folks there as well, and finding ways that we can cross across these various centers to engage in these conversations. I think that would be something that would be incredible.
Yeah. Plus, we have members of our own community that are ready to step into that. We do have a lot of members in our own community that want to have that conversation. Let's see. Conditioned our biases. I think our best promise for a real better future is an equal opportunity for good education. And you know what? That does that this whole. So I was having another conversation with someone else, and it does hinge on the disparity. And now this is where it gets political. It does hinge on this this economic disparity in communities. Where are we educating our kids? Where are we educating, and where do they get quality education? Where do they get quality health care? When someone's basic needs are met, they're on every level. They have shelter, they have food, they have health care, they have an education. When we provide a basic foundation for those things, I think things begin to shift.
Hmm.
So I was thinking about this, and for a while after the I think did I talk about this, after the race riots in the 60s. The auto industry was booming in those Rust Belt states, and then when they were abandoned, that was the time when the middle class disappeared, and that's when the people who, when the middle class disappeared, it fell into the lower economic status, and that's when real struggles started to happen. I think that's where struggles still exist in those areas.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because we've lost that middle layer, which people had that, and communities had that. And I was looking at excuse me, when Flint was in its heyday, and that was I'd say a 50% black, 50% white community at the time. Things were thriving for everyone. It wasn't just a certain group of people, because everyone had opportunity, and those opportunities have changed and shifted and downgraded. So something else to look at is because it is part of the vote. You have to get out and vote.
Yeah.
So the mayor was saying, I love that mayor in Atlanta today. She was really good.
San Bernardino is also like that. It was a thriving community, I believe, back in the 50s.
Yeah. Isn't that odd? Okay, here we go. Man, we got lots of messages in only 8 minutes. When I was in college, I read a Black Like Me and Five Smooth Stones. My chest hurt, and here I am 50 years later. My chest is hurting. I agree. Let's start the book with a Zoom call. We're talking about that. Everything matters. What's the book list you are recommending as a priority to begin? Jeffon, hold that book up while I read some of these. There we go. Right, fragility. That's going to be the one we launch with. All Lives Matter is inclusive.
It is.
Introspection, then education, then communication. It is sometimes hard to hear Joe speak. Get closer to the mic. Okay. Sorry about that. I love this conversation. Would appreciate very much attending the weekly class and being part of the solution. All right, we rolled through all those.
Can I touch on this? The point that I believe it's Rusty said, "All lives matter" is inclusive.
Yep.
I think that yes, inclusivity is so important, and um, if it's Rusty who did mention that, I feel that this is my perspective again. I feel that the reason why we have yet to create a truly inclusive system, or even within organizations, I travel around. That's my business. Is I work with large organizations, government agencies, academic institutions, Fortune 500 corporations to help them address diversity and create inclusive culture where everybody is wanted, valued, and respected. And it seems as if the reason why inclusion has missed the mark. We've been talking about it since early 2000s, is because of that illusionary dyad that I mentioned in our beginning conversation. Individuals feel they're superior, and some individuals feel as if they're inferior or are looked at as inferior. And this creates a divide where exclusion thrives. And even in the all lives matter, yes, that is a fundamental truth that all of us, I think, would agree. Um, but in doing so, we can see that we have not, as a society, been truly inclusive to help represent those three powerful words that all lives matter. And I'm that's just something that was on my mind that I want to
No,
share. And
it's true. That's true. And by the way, it's Russ and D. It's a
oh,
look.
okay,
No. But Russ and D. I'm going to out you guys, Russ and D. They are two longtime members of our community. I call them sterling. We don't call people old. They're sterling members of our community who've been there for a very, very, very long time, like probably almost 30 years.
wow,
And they watch every one of these, and they attend all of our Sunday services, and they're always very vocal and very, very honest and to the point. And they're also probably they're in their early 80s probably, and they're going, what can we do when you're 80 years old? What can you do? How do you want me to look at this and handle this? And I look at the demographic of our congregation. We do have a much older congregation, but we also have the opportunity to educate even when you're 80, and that's why I appreciate you guys just even showing up. to this conversation.
I would love to, maybe when everything opens back up miraculously, I would love to be a part of a conversation where I can learn from the members in the congregation. I would love to hear Russ and Dee's experience through their lives that they've seen in ways in which, the landscape has shifted and transformed, and things that they've done throughout their lives. Doesn't necessarily have to be race related by any means, just in general, and beginning to have a conversation, because I think there is so much value to be gained from individuals who have been here long before me. My mentor in Salt Lake is an African American man from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, extremely successful. I shared a little bit about him to you, Joe, and his experience. I ask him about it all the time, and there's so much that I learned, and that's something that I wish I could have talked to my grandparents about before they made their transition. And I would love to be there to learn from you and hear your experience and things that I could embrace and carry forward, because I cannot sit here and act as if I know it all. To do so would be arrogant and ignorant.
Right. Oh, I'm sure they'll meet with you. They're lovely people. When we all get to, when this whole pandemic,
Whatever is happening,
I
right?
have to share this one little story finally at the end. My dad had dementia for like 12 years, and it got really, really, really bad. But it was in his mind he reverted back to the 60s when he was a player in race relations, when he was actually, working with the Black and white communities, and really, really, really working on that. And I have to tell you a really funny story. So we would take Dad out, and sometimes he would become the man that was in the 60s, and he would start talking to people as if they were in the 60s.
Hmm.
And so he went in a grocery store one time. He went up to this young Black child and gave it, right, grocery store, right? And here's this old man, this old white guy, walking up to a young Black girl in the little girl in the dairy section. And he ran up and gave her a big hug and said, "I think you should have equal rights." And of course, that mom is going, first of all, there's a pedophile. Secondly, hell are you talking about, old man? I mean, but in his mind, that's where he was. I mean, he was still going, I just want everybody to be equal, and I want you to be equal, and you to be equal. And here he was, he wasn't, a lot of times he wasn't even in the zip code in his mind, in his real mind. But I bring that up just because it was such a cute thing. He's like, in his head, he was still like working in that capacity to bring that to change. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Even that, it was ingrained in him that's who. It's funny, that's the phase of his life that he went back to and resided in when he was in his last years. He went back to the 60s and resided in the, I have to help people be
Wow.
develop that equality.
Hmm.
So just off the cuff story, but anyway. So Jeffon, thank you so much. Let's see. Way to go, Russ and Dee, mom and dad. Oh, Russ and Dee's daughter's listening. You raised us well to love and to serve all lives that matter. Great. I love this conversation. Would appreciate very much attending the. Okay, got that. So Jeffon, we did it another hour, man. We talk forever, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, we could keep going, right? We could have still been talking from Sunday and probably had some more things to talk about.
So, exactly. So let me do some quick announcements. Don't forget, there's a couple things. Here we go. First off, you're going to get a robocall in the next couple of days. We have a committee, or what we call the reopening committee, that has established themselves to create all of the things that are required for us to reopen the center. Right now, tentatively, and it's very tentative, we're looking at probably the first Sunday in July, but that is very tentative. We got to make sure after the survey, we'll find out exactly who's going to show up and whether you guys want to continue doing the online for a little bit longer or not. So we're going to put a survey out there. Please pay attention to that. We'll let you know when it's coming out. At 12:30 today, in about another hour and 30 minutes, we have our ministerial students are going to be doing their talks, and you can actually click in and watch them. We're going to send out an email to everyone that gives you the schedule, and it's just a link that you click on, and you can watch people live stream their talks. So you'll see our ministerial students doing their final talks. They're all in Westlake Village right now doing that. Let's see. See, that's, I think, the book study. we're good. I think that's all we have for today. So tomorrow is the Sensational Six. They'll all be in a little bit better space, although they may be a little bit edgy because on Thursday and Friday they do their panels. So, but I can't wait to see what they have to say. We have 6 ministerial students about ready to graduate. So
Awesome.
this week, hopefully let's just know they're all going to get through. So again, Jeffon, thank you so much. And let's just close with this idea. Close your eyes, take a deep breath in. And wherever you are, just know that something that was said here today is a nugget of truth that we can move forward with and allow our life to expand, express, and experience even more of that divine presence that is calling us into action right here and right now. We know that there is peace and divine order being established all throughout the country and all throughout the world right now, as we know that the greatest of things, that is love, continues to prevail. Open hearts, open minds, and love are bringing change in this world right now. For Jeffon and his time and his beautiful voice, we just say thank you, Jeffon. You are truly a gift to our congregation and to everyone. We're so very blessed by having you here with us. We are very grateful. And for all of you who joined in, I know that there are open hearts and minds that now walk forward with greater confidence, knowing what is ours to do. And we begin doing it one day at a time. For this, we're so very grateful. We let it be so, and so it is.
So it is.
Amen, man. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody who tuned in and your questions, conversations. I truly appreciate all of you.
Thanks, Jeffon. All right, we'll be in touch. I'll call you later on.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Jeff.